Welcome, everyone, to the Chicago League of Women Voters Chicago in Focus program. I am Deborah Halpern, a League member and co-chair of the Chicago League's Environmental Action Committee and your host for this evening. So I thank you all so very much for joining us. Just a quick word about our format tonight. This program is being recorded and will be available on the Chicago League's website soon. Please put all of your questions into the chat. And at the end of the presentation, I will be reading the questions to our presenters for you. And I have been assured we'll have plenty of time for questions, so please don't hesitate. And finally, I have muted everyone so that there will be no distractions during the program. So before we get going, I actually have two introductions for you. The first one is from Mark Tooney, the General Manager of the Chicago League, the Union League Club of Chicago. Our focus programs are sponsored by the Union League Club of Chicago, which is located at 65 West Jackson Boulevard in Chicago. During those wonderful pre-COVID days, these programs were presented in person at the Union League Club, and we sincerely look forward to resuming that as soon as it is humanly possible. For now, I will share with you a message from Mark Tooney, the General Manager. And he says, since its founding more than 140 years ago, the Union League Club has asked its members to uphold its commitment to community, country, and culture. Through philanthropic work, it honors the past, serves the present, and works to ensure the future. The club's Public Affairs Committee is at the forefront of that mission, with subcommittees focusing on a range of topics such as race relations, education, gender equality, and more. Their Public Affairs Committee connects club members and the community to topical issues and provides a platform for civil discourse. The work of the Union League Club of Chicago members do from a civic and philanthropic perspective is continuous and important. If this sounds like an organization you would like to be part of, you are invited to join them. There will be a link and contact information in our follow-up email. Next, I would like to share with you a pre-recorded welcome from the president of our Chicago League of Women Voters, Ann Jameson, who regrets she could not be with us tonight. So you may need to adjust the volume to hear this video and then turn it back down afterwards.
Good evening. Thank you so much for joining us for the first League of Women Voters Chicago in Focus of 2022, and also the first CIF organized by our new Environmental Action Committee. We are joined tonight by Chris Sauve, the City of Chicago's Deputy Commissioner of Policy and Sustainability. Chris is a 20-year veteran with the Chicago Department of Streets and Sanitation, and Bill Schleizer, CEO of the Delta Institute. The Delta Institute was commissioned by the City of Chicago to do the 2021 Waste Management Study. The Delta Institute is a nonprofit organization working throughout the Midwest as a trusted advisor, technical provider, and project implementation expert for partners across public, private, nonprofit, and community sectors to solve complex environmental challenges. We're very fortunate to have both Chris and Bill here today to give us an overview of the study, update us on the city's short-term priorities, educate us on the extended producer responsibility legislation, and let us know what the city's next steps will be in waste management. I know you all will have many questions, so as we go through this, please type any questions you have into the chat, and we will try to answer as many as we can at the end of this presentation. So please join me in welcoming Chris and Bill.
Thank you, Deb, and thank you, Claudia, and the rest of the league members. My name is Chris Sauve. Can you guys all hear me okay?
Can hear you great, Chris.
Thanks, Bill. That's a great segue into Bill. Bill Schleizer is with the Delta Institute, and he partnered with us, as you heard in the intro, to work on this waste strategy that was introduced last July. We've got about 18 slides or so here. We'll walk through this. Bill's going to handle the first 7 or so. I will take it home after that. And as was talked about in the intro, there's a lot in here. There's a deeper dive on extended producer responsibility. So why don't we just jump right into it? Bill, let's just go.
Yeah, let's do it, Chris. And thank you, everybody. We're really excited to be here tonight to talk about where we're at with the Chicago waste strategy, update you on, give you an overview of the strategy as a whole, the objectives behind it, but as well as now, what are we doing? Delta, works throughout the Midwest working on complex environmental challenges, and there isn't many more complex than dealing with waste in a large metropolitan area, as Chris would be able to tell you. And we're really excited to have the opportunity to work with Chicago, the city of Chicago, and the agencies on this topic, because we at Delta have been working on waste issues since we founded the Rebuilding Exchange way back in the late 2000s. So it's always something that's core to our heart, is how do we deal with waste in a sustainable way that also creates economic opportunity. So what we'll do tonight is go through some slides pretty quickly to give you an overview and recap, and talk about where we're going, and do that deeper dive, and then leave plenty of time at the end of the conversation for questions. So Chris, why don't we just go right into it? And let's give you a quick project overview. So really, we partnered with the city to come up with a way to not only focus on the one number that we all know about, the blue cart recycling number for single family residential homes, but also open up all the cupboards. What's actually going on within the city, within the private sector, in communities around waste and recycling, with a goal to reduce waste, increase diversion, keep things out of the waste stream and recover them, and create economic opportunity, all with the lens of making sure that we aren't doing anything that continues environmental injustice. So we took a look at all the policies, contracts, data, infrastructure. We tried to update what was happening with waste generation numbers. We talked to around 100 stakeholders within the city and communities in the nonprofit and for-profit sectors. And we looked at what other cities were doing, what has been working, what has failed spectacularly, and what can we learn from their best practices that could actually work here in Chicago. And from all of that work, we created a list of priorities to really look at how we can deal with waste management here in an innovative, sustainable, and holistic way. So we created a series of reports, because this is pretty comprehensive, and this is just the first step. And I'm putting into the chat the link where, if you are interested in really getting in deep to them, where all the reports are available on the City of Chicago website. But we kind of summarize things into an executive summary, but then there are four reports based off of all the work that we did. What's happening, the existing conditions report is all focused on what's the infrastructure in the city, what are the policies and ordinances, what's the evolution of waste management here in Chicago. Like I said, we looked at a lot of other cities and what they're doing. We also updated waste generation. The last time a waste generation report was done was about a decade ago, and it's time to do it again. We didn't have enough time or money for something as comprehensive as that for this project, but that's one of our recommendations further on. And then really the meat of the project was coming up with the strategies that the city could look into, and both short-term and long-term, because we really wanted to have an arc of how do we get things started and how do we get things moving forward, so that we can create a community of support and show that the city and its partners, both in the city itself and in the nonprofit and private sectors, can really deal with waste in a sustainable way. We kind of categorized all of those into that materials management report. I think that's the next slide, Chris. With recommendations that cover 7 categories, and there were 63 recommendations overall. And the way that we broke it down, the first 2 categories really are about what the city is doing around coordination, interagency-wise, really being able to create data transparency and tracking so we can baseline and set goals. And the second one is, how do we keep things out of the waste stream just to begin with? So there's a whole bunch around source reduction, reuse, and repair. The next 5 categories of strategies are all about the different types of waste and how it's generated. So we have residential waste, both single family and multifamily. We have our industrial, commercial, and institutional waste. Organics and wasted food there's a large push for that, and we have some great updates around what's going to be happening that Chris will be providing. Specialty materials is things like bulk, chemicals, pharmaceuticals, and other things that you can't just throw away, but you have to deal with in special ways. And then finally, construction and demolition debris, which is very heavy waste to deal with. So from those strategies, we kind of, through the 63 recommendations that we came up with for the city, we broke it down into kind of 3 types of recommendations. Optimal recommendations would have complex, implementation and timelines and budgets. Practical would be things that could probably be rolled out at full scale in a more simpler and kind of time delineated way. And then things that we can pilot right now, just get started going with it and see what we can do to really take that forward. So that's really where all those recommendations came from. And out of those 63, we worked with the city to prioritize 12 to really deal with on a short-term basis. And we're really excited tonight to let you all know where we're at with those first 12 and what we're looking at, both what we've accomplished in 2021, but also what 2022 is going to be looking at. So Chris, I'm going to hand it over to you.
Thanks a lot, Bill. And just before I jump into these slides and the kind of progress updates on where we're at with some of these that we've been working on, I heard this week that in order to know where you're going, you've got to have a bit of a plan, right? Otherwise, you could just take any path and you're never really going to get there. What we really needed to, or from my perspective, having been with Streets and Sand in the city for 20 years, we've needed a direction as to what we wanted to accomplish with the city's recycling program, and just with what Delta has rebranded as material management overall. And for us, meaning for the folks at Streets and Sand and with the city, material management is sort of a newer part of our lexicon, right? Typically with Streets and Sanitation, everything was just simply garbage and snow removal with what we do. My time with Streets and Sand, I was part of the rollout and the development of the Blue Cart program. Just to provide a little bit more background from where I come from, that was really probably the biggest single piece that I've had to work on since I've been with Streets and Sanitation. But the rest of the goals and the rest of the work around solid waste management within the city has been something that has not had the directions that I feel that we've needed. And this administration, Lightfoot administration, was when they came into office, they were somebody that were definitely interested in finding out what we wanted to do in terms of improving recycling overall for residential homes, but also for all of the other parts of the waste management process that happens in this city. And a lot of those responsibilities are with my department and specifically with my office. There are a whole set of those recommendations that Bill mentioned, the 63, that do not sit with Streets and Sand, but are part of the rest of the city departmental structures. So Department of Public Health, Business Affairs and Consumer Protection, even CDOT, Transportation, has a hand in some of the waste management activity that does occur in the city. So as Bill mentioned from the outset, oftentimes I think people think of waste as sort of a simpler issue. It's really not. It is pretty complex. And I will take the aside to mention the conversations I've had with Claudia. I know that this is a very passionate topic for members of the league, and specifically with Claudia. I've had 2 or 3 conversations one-on-one with her where we've gone deep into this study, things that needed to take place in order to take some corrective measures. And this progress update I'm going to give you in this next 10 or so slides kind of speaks to things that were born out of the waste study and some newer funding and some newer positions that have been allocated to my department. And I do think that 2022 is going to start to see us really bounce back and start to improve a lot of what people are seeing, specifically with recycling and Blue Cart, but also just the waste management process overall in the city. So as Bill mentioned, there are 12 of these strategies that we had identified as ones that we could start to work on immediately. These first 2 are ones that have got a lot of progress. researching and implementing waste hauling zones for commercial collection. And what does that really mean? Cities like New York and Los Angeles have instituted sort of zones of operation for waste collection that does happen. My department, Streets and Sand, handles collections of about 625,000 households in the city, but we do all the low density housing collection. So that's single family homes and buildings that have 4 or fewer dwelling units. All the other waste and recycling activity that is done in the city is pretty much done by the private industry, private sector. So if you're in a high-rise building, if you're in a commercial retail business, you're contracting with a private company to do that work. Well, in Chicago, we have a free market system. There isn't the same sort of regulatory controls over which companies can work in which areas of the city. This isn't a new concept, but it would be new to Chicago. I will say it's not even a new concept in terms of city departments and having looked at this. We looked at it about 10, 12 years ago when there was a Department of Environment here in the city as a possible means to bring to Chicago to have a better regulatory control over what happens with private waste collection. Right now, it's sort of left up to the management companies or the building owners to figure out who they want to actually have service their building for waste and recycling. We feel it's important to go back and look at this and try to figure out a way that we could get to setting up zones of operations in the city where you would have possibly 1 to 5 different companies operating in, say, the central business district. And it wouldn't be a wide open marketplace as we have now, where you could have up to 15 or 20 different operators in a given area of the city. It helps primarily with regulating that industry and determining, who's working where. It has better transparency over the cost and the implementation of, say, full-on separate recycling collections. That's now a requirement in the city. And again, it's something that cities like New York and LA have already looked at. New York is in the midst of starting to roll it out, even in New York City. So it is, in terms of the city department regulatory of private waste, it's absolutely something that would help and have a huge impact in terms of increasing the amount of material going to landfill, improve transparency, improve price controls over that operation, and for buildings that have to contract with private waste and recycling services. The second point on here that we've done a lot of work on in 2021, and there will be a lot more that will be happening in 2022, is extended producer responsibility legislation, or EPR. I've got a couple of slides following up this one that will do a deeper dive just specifically into EPR. The other two that we've targeted for work on this year that will be something we work with our friends at the Department of Public Health is our construction demolition debris recycling ordinance. This has been in effect for about 15 years. It's just something that I think we need to go back to and revisit and probably improve upon. There's a lot of opportunity here with C&D materials here in the city. And it's just something that we need to do a better job of lifting up and partnering with other city departments to help improve. Okay, EPR, extended producer responsibility. Give me 1 second, I just want to. So EPR refers to, again, it's extended producer responsibility. It is setting up policies that would require the producers and manufacturers of certain products to have to pay for the handling and disposal of those products. It has a much more circular view of how, especially things like waste product, and specifically what we're talking about for Illinois is introducing EPR for packaging and paper products. So oftentimes, or what you may be hearing sometimes at some point this year, is EPR laws for PPP, that is packaging and paper products. EPR is something that has really started to take on, gained a lot of momentum in 2021. There were 2 states last year who introduced and passed EPR for packaging. Oregon and Maine, both in 2021, passed an EPR law for packaging products. Although EPR laws are not exactly new, even the state of Illinois, there are some EPR laws that cover specialty materials. Typically, you'll see it on things like rechargeable batteries or mercury thermostats. But even here in Illinois, we have an EPR legislation in place already for electronic waste. So computers, televisions, there's a funding that's already set up that consumers end up contributing to, but it's really the manufacturers of those items that are the ones that are responsible for paying for the proper disposal and recycling of that material. And what we're talking about for EPR, excuse me, EPR in Illinois is setting up a packaging system that would be funded by the manufacturers. The best example that I would give is something like a box of cereal. For a box of cereal, there's packaging that surrounds it, which is the box, and on the inside of it, you've even got a secondary piece of plastic that actually houses the bag of, or is the bag that houses the actual cereal that comes contained within. We're talking about having those manufacturers have to pay for the cost to get that recycling box recycled through the municipal collection systems. So what would end up happening is those manufacturers that are selling within the state would have to pool their monies together, and eventually cities would be reimbursed for the cost of their recycling program. It's a game changer in terms of how recycling systems would work in the state, how waste disposal systems would work in the state. The update that I'll have for EPR is that there's a working group that has met in Illinois. We've done a briefing with a couple of different organizations, one of which was the Illinois Environmental Council. And I know that Jen Walling is a member of the League of Women Voters. She is somebody that, in terms of moving environmental legislation, she's somebody we wanted to partner with and kind of get her take on what EPR could mean in the state. So it's got a long way to go. We're talking probably 2 to 3 years before legislation would be something that would be, passed in Springfield. But we do feel confident that in 2022, there will be legislation that is drafted and ready for introduction. So a few of the other updates beyond franchising and beyond EPR that I wanted to talk through. Bill mentioned organics as a part of the waste study. That was something that is going to be a huge game changer and a huge area of need for our department. We've partnered with the National Resource Defense Council on a grant opportunity and a cohort of Midwestern cities to work on different food rescue and food composting initiatives. For our department, I'll dig in a little bit when we get to the organic sections about the food scrap collections that we're going to be introducing in 2022. But the other 2 or 3 items I wanted to mention here: providing clear and consistent messaging around recycling, blue cart recycling and contamination, what constitutes contamination. That is definitely a goal for our department this year. We're going to be working with a 501c3 called the Recycling Partnership to do a research project on what we need to do to improve our messaging, specifically to residents who live in Chicago neighborhoods and who are using our Blue Cart program. Offering more organic drop-off locations through things like pumpkin smash events. This last fall, we worked with Scarce, who does a lot of these pumpkin smash events. There were at least 5 of them that we helped partner with that were done in November of this year. We collected 20 tons of pumpkins. These are ones that were expired jack-o'-lanterns from the Halloween season. We feel that we could probably augment the 5 or so locations that existed in 2021, try to get to say 10 or 15 for this year. Last point I'll mention here is one of those hard to deal with type items is textiles. So we're talking, old clothes and shoes. There is the opportunity through the park district. They actually have an agreement now. There are 20 park locations that are currently collecting textiles, and they're actually generating revenue from the material that they're collecting. It's one of those other partnerships with a city agency that we want to build upon and provide more opportunities to collect that textile material. These last three that I'm going to mention is identifying areas that we can do a better job of finding the right balance of recycling to garbage containers. This is something our department knows that we need to get into more. Our biggest issue when it comes to dealing with carts themselves is they tend to be a movable object, and having a good inventory of where these carts are and getting to the right level of carts for residents is always going to be a challenge, but it is something we're looking to improve upon this year. This next point about improving high density recycling, I think there was a fairly prominent report that the Inspector General's office did to highlight what wasn't happening in terms of enforcing this ordinance. This is something that our department has the responsibility to do. We've done a lot to do a better job of tracking the reporting that we see from waste haulers. We've done a much better job in terms of reacting to residents' requests for an inspection at their home. And we've even improved the ticket writing and what is called our mobile asset ticketing system, our MET system, to be able to track and to do a better job of enforcing buildings that aren't currently providing that service. And then lastly, there was a recommendation to do a ride-along program for yard waste and to augment that with food scrap collections. So that is something we probably will see happen later in this summer, where we could actually, within residential alleys, provide food scrap collections to streets and sanitation collected households. The big piece that I wanted to highlight that our department is going to see in 2022 is we're going to be getting 8 new positions dedicated to work on the waste strategies that were outlined by the Delta Institute to help improve everything that we're doing around material management and recycling. Those 8 positions, there are 2 program development and 2 community outreach coordinators. So these are positions that, again, currently don't exist within our department, but would go a long way to help developing the programs that we need to improve waste diversion and recycling. And then to expand upon the outreach and the recycling campaign, we need folks that are dedicated to getting our message out there in the community. So those 8 positions will go a long way as far as moving the strategies that are part of this waste study. Another huge component is capital funding. We'll be getting $6.5 million to develop those food scrap and organic collection pilots I've talked about. I think the one that I'll mention here is we'll probably look at offering food scrap collections in about 5 locations. These would be drop-off points throughout the city where residents could take food scrap and drop it off to be composted. This is something that we've never offered. We don't have anything like that yet as far as the menu of services at Streets and Sand, but it will be new as part of our operating budget. And that $6.5 million is part of a larger climate bond that the department and the city departments have all received. The other thing I'll mention as far as Streets and Sand in terms of our operations, we're actually getting $23 million to do tree planting. I think the estimate is about 75,000 trees. New trees will be planted over the next 5 years. So this was a huge, huge improvement to our department, and getting the funding to start to roll out some of these strategies was definitely key. And I think it was a direct result of this study that we've done. Again, I mentioned the pumpkin smash and what we did this past fall in working with partners like Scarce. Lastly, I'll mention our tree recycling, which is currently going on. We've got through the end of this weekend to take your Christmas tree or holiday tree to any one of 26 locations. Last year, we collected over 20,000 trees in that program. So some of the next steps that we're talking about, the outreach and education planning. I mentioned this recycling partnership research plan project that should start in March of this year. The drop-off locations for organic material and food scrap, that should launch this spring. Our food waste ride-along, that I mentioned in some of the residential parts of the city, we're looking for a summer of 2022 launch. And some of the other possible programs we're looking at are things like a blue cart cleanliness team. So if we do have those community outreach people that would start sometime this summer, we would go around to different areas in the city where we have blue carts, do an evaluation of the recyclables that are set out, and try to give a scorecard to communities on how well they're doing with recycling. And where we would start to push that message out is our block captains. We have had a network of recycling block captains. These are community members all throughout the city that we would use to help push our message, to be sort of on the ground, grassroots type people, to spread that message on what we need people to do and what constitutes, good recycling. I mentioned our pumpkin smash already. The last thing I want to mention as far as a project that we're closing out with or work with the Delta Institute is a update of our solid waste management plan. So this is the 5-year plan that we would have to talk about new projects that we want to get up off the ground for these next few years to start to improve what we're doing in the solid waste field. I think one of the other things that Delta Institute pointed out to us in terms of doing a better job of communicating across departments and within the sister agencies with the city was definitely sorely lacking. I mentioned it as like a switchboard type system that just started to get repaired this last year, and having that connective tissue is really important in between city departments. External partnerships is always going to be focused. And again, adding those positions this next year will certainly go a long way in improving our outreach to groups like the League of Women Voters and other community action groups across the city. As part of that community action work and climate action, we've got the climate action plan that the Lightfoot administration is starting to actually do public forums on. There's one tonight to talk about climate action. And we also are a part of the We Will planning that's currently going on. This is a longer planning group that has got a 3-year time horizon that is going to help develop kind of a working document and planning for the Department of Planning and Development. So that's the end of Bill and I's part of the presentation. We're going to open it up for questions and discussion.
Well, Bill and Chris, I cannot thank you enough for all of that. Can you take down your screen share, please, Chris? And that way I will be able to see everybody and ask your questions. So we do have a lot of questions for you. And I'm going to start, hang on one second, at the top. But this was all very exciting. I have one quick question before we all start, and that one is for you, Bill. Are the other departments within the city of Chicago working with you as closely as Chris is with the streets and sands?
Yeah, we've been having really good conversations with them. And one of the things that we do want to put in place for 2022 is an interagency coordination group. We have been working directly with the mayor's office and Chris at Streets and Sand primarily, and bringing in the other departments as needed on those specific issues that we've highlighted. But what we want to do going forward is have possibly, a quarterly tempo to meetings between these agencies to make sure that we are really able to coordinate all these different pieces of who does what, when, and how. Because one of the things that is lacking is if a waste hauler permit is moving from one agency to another and we're trying to get data from it and they're not reporting, how do we make sure that we're on top of that so that we can have that transparency about the generation data and setting those baselines and know what the diversion rate truly is through the different types of waste streams in the city?
Yeah, and I'll just jump in there too to kind of help augment what Bill mentioned. We've asked through the mayor's office to try to do quarterly updates with all the city departments that we currently work with. I think I did mention, there used to be Department of Environment, and I think they ended up overseeing a lot of the city departments and try to do the work of cross-communicating between all the city departments. I know that working on this waste study with Delta the last year or so certainly has helped improve the communication lines between departments, but we do need to keep that going. That is something we've been working with the mayor's office to try to get to a regular at least quarterly update with those other city department partners that we have.
Well, that's great, because communication between departments, wonderful step. All right, we're going to go to the questions that we have in the chat, and the first one is from Betty. And she would like to know, how would the zone change affect garbage pickup for minority businesses?
I don't know if I can specifically talk about minority businesses, but I do know that when the city looked at franchising 10 years ago, there was a rate survey that was done to determine the different costs that buildings were paying for the same service. And we were seeing a huge disparity between the charges for the same level of service. So we, at the time, in working through with the consultants, it was determined that if we were to standardize the rates across the city, there would be a reduction, I think, in 80% of the users that were paying private waste collections would actually see a reduction in their costs.
And I'll just comment really quickly. That's similar to what we saw when we looked at minority majority cities in Cook County. We looked at all 260 municipalities in Cook County at the waste contracts, and there is disproportionately high costs to minority municipalities. So we like Chris is saying, that also exists for businesses that don't have access to the information for really a fair playing field. So something like this could allow that to happen. On the other side of it, if there could potentially even be opportunity for minority business to get engaged in waste management, and that could be another economic opportunity and innovation that the city could help support as well.
Thank you. Okay, this is a rather long question from Jordan, and she asks, private waste haulers are notorious for providing ambiguous dumpsters for landfill and recycling, contributing to the contamination of recycling. Waste haulers like Lakeshore Recycling Systems are not motivated to get this right. However, because they can change buildings for both landfill and recycling, and also change an additional tipping fee when all the quote unquote recycling is landfill, it is economically in their best interest to landfill all of our recycling. How can we address this conflict of interest and get our private waste haulers to start doing the right thing?
Yeah, I think the reporting aspect of Jordan's question is key, right? And our department is working with the health department to record those numbers, record those operators that are doing this type of collection within the city. That idea of doing a franchise type system so there would be greater regulatory oversight over these haulers is something that would be a huge solution to the types of things that Jordan's mentioning here in the question. We would want to see their diversion rates and really do a better job of penalizing them if they're not doing what they're supposed to be doing within their contracts. We collect data at the moment, but it's not as if we've got the authority to go back and penalize them and do the correct type of auditing of the type of information that they're providing to us.
There's also, as part of that, there is the kind of signage requirements that are supposed to be on those things. So enforcement of those, so that getting that reported as well, so that you can have the reporting of noncompliance of what's happening in the alleys. That's critically important in this particular case as well.
Okay. Abigail would like to know, how will EPR incentivize a change in packaging materials?
Yeah, so there is a part of the legislative process or I should say the development of the legislation that the EPR group is looking at, and having eco-modulated pricing for the products that a manufacturer creates is part of what we're discussing right now in the legislation. So the incentive would obviously be built directly into the legislation that would be drafted. There is a lot that still has to be determined with the EPR for Illinois. What it means for municipal collections would be simply our program itself could be funded almost completely or fully through an APR type system. But the devil's in the details in terms of the manufacturers themselves. And I know this has been a hot topic in terms of, well, we need to get manufacturers to start producing products and packaging that is fully recyclable. That is part of the discussions in drafting this legislation. And I know, at least from the waste and recycling world, or I should say from the recycling world, the focus has been to try to get to as close to 100% recyclable as possible in terms of the packaging. But it is one of the things that, part of drafting the legislation, we're not quite finalized there yet in terms of how that's going to all come together.
Okay. Jan is asking, is there specific legislation that the league can ask its members to support by contacting their alderpersons or legislators? Is there anything that we can do to help you?
Well, I will say this: when we know that the EPR legislation is ready for introduction and the sponsorship, I would be happy to report back to the league on how you guys could help in terms of supporting that. I think having Jen Walling, again, I think I mentioned that in the presentation, she's a member of the league. Having her a part of the process to help draft the legislation itself is key, right? You've already got a member that's is doing the work to help develop it here in Illinois. But again, I think when we get to a point where we're going to need the support, it's upon us to do the outreach to let you know when that would be coming and to ask for your support.
Okay, and please keep us in mind as anything else comes up. We are great at contacting our alderpersons constantly. So Abigail has another question directed to you, Chris, and that is, she says, when I went to the hazardous waste drop-off place off Division, they didn't have advice on what to do with the things they didn't take. Should they have had advice?
Certainly, they should offer a couple of different avenues for the hard to recycle type items. It's something I could take back to our friends at Public Health to do a better job of that. It came up today about propane tanks, actually, from a resident. So, Abigail, I don't know if you were trying to recycle some propane tanks, but we had to do a deeper dive, and actually, our hazardous waste facility does take that material. But it is a note I can take back to our health department folks to try to, at least route people back to a source where they can find the hard to recycle sites.
And I'll just also say that the city of Chicago has been partnering with Recycle by City, which has a directory of things that can be recycled and how. So that's one resource. And then one of the things that I personally follow is the Chicago Environmentalist Facebook group, where a lot of these questions come up as well. And there's a lot of creative solutions for reuse, repair, share, and also how to deal with harder to deal with issues. But I think as the city of Chicago is continuing to move forward, they're going to have more opportunities to share across different material types about how to best deal with them.
Do you think it would be helpful if the hazardous waste sites actually had printed flyers with that information that they could have given to Abigail so that she could follow up on it herself?
Yep, that is definitely that's a good suggestion. We have done that in the past, especially when, like Bill mentioned, when we launched Recycle by Cities, one of our partners a few years ago. It's kind of an easy one, so I definitely will take that recommendation back to our folks. That'd
be great. Thank you. Okay, we have more questions from both Jordan and Abigail. This one is Jordan's. She says, Americans send 10.6 million tons of dog waste to landfills every year, which off-gases methane, greatly contributing to climate change. Composting dog waste is the optimal solution, separate from food scrap composting. But as a second best solution, I think flushing our dog waste and processing it along with human waste is also a good way to avoid methane. Do you agree?
So it's a human behavior sort of thing, and it's how do you create a way to be able to do that easily, and that would be a packaging issue, a transport issue, and MWRD I will say is always looking for more material to go through its system, and that would be one way to be able to do it, but it is a little bit trickier just from like a logistics point of view. I know when I had my dog, sometimes that could not be brought back inside the house.
Okay.
I'll give my 2 cents on this one. Dog waste comes off oftentimes for our department when it comes to rodent control and vector control. It's mentioned oftentimes that animal waste is something that is an attractant to rats in the city. So definitely keeping it, picking up, curbing your dog, whatever is key. As far as dealing with it in the water waste treatment system, I don't really have a good answer on that one. It's not something I've ever really looked into. So I'm a little bit, I'm not sure how to answer that one.
Okay, it's something for all dog owners to think about. The next question is from Claudia, and Chris, this is the Claudia Jackson you referred to, and just for everybody, Claudia Jackson and I are co-chairs of the Environmental Action Committee for the Chicago League. So Claudia is asking, how does the city get to one message for recycling? Each private hauler has a different list, which again is different from the Department of Streets and Sanitation.
Yeah, it's a great question. It's actually something that the state of Illinois has a task force that is working on we're putting a single message together on even at the municipal level. You go from municipality to municipality, there are differing lists on who takes what. Something like a unified list of materials that need to be accepted and recycled would definitely be born out of having a franchised type system where we would have greater regulation and oversight to say, this list of say 12 items is absolutely something that everybody's going to have to take. It can definitely be a frustrating part of the recycling process wherever you go. But we do have a basic list of items that are required for haulers to have to accept in their system.
Well, I would also think that it would be helpful if there was more information, especially I'm in a high rise here in the city. And if there was more information available to all residents that are in the high rises as to exactly what is acceptable, because it just doesn't work when everybody spends a great deal of effort to put all of their recycling into a plastic bag, they tie it up, and they put it into the recycling bin. And that is not going to be recycled. So there should be greater guidelines and information to all of us high-rise dwellers, I would suggest.
Yeah, it's definitely an area of need, and I will be the first one to admit that's not been our focus, right? Our department had always been focused on the residential customers that we service, right? Anyone that has streets and sanitation service. So, and I have, because of the waste study, because of conversations and comments like this, Deborah, it's definitely something that's not lost on my department. And I think it's going to be a focus of the outreach staff that we should be bringing on board this year to focus just solely on things like high-rise buildings and doing a better job of messaging and pointing out what is required of buildings, the systems that are already in place, and how or ordinances that are already in place, and how buildings and these companies would need to be complying with that.
Okay. I have a comment. It is not a question, it is a comment from Tessa. And she says, as someone who in my nonprofit role very frequently answers questions about hard to recycle items or things that are still usable but no longer needed, I'm eager to see comprehensive resources from the city to guide Chicagoans in their efforts to recycle, donate their items responsibly.
Agreed, and that's one of the priorities that we recommended in the waste management strategy. With that external partnership building with the streets and sanitation, having that comprehensive directory being built is definitely something that we want to see happen, and it's starting to. But we have a long way to go because there's so many different types of things and there's so many different ways to reuse them, and we keep coming up with more creative solutions, which is great. But we need to continuously have that cycle, of how do we keep this stuff circular, and then how do we record it so that other people don't have to go through the same journey, and really have access to those resources easily.
Okay.
Yeah, the only thing I'm going to do right there is just agree with Bill, and mention that is something that is definitely key, even in helping our own recycling program, right? Because there is a lot of wish recycling that is going on still, where people, would hope that what they put in their blue card is something that, should be recycled, or they wish it could be recycled. And we just need to be doing a better job of pointing out the, core items that we want to be placed in there, and to try to find those alternatives for things that, if they can't go in our blue cart and you don't want to put them in your black cart, can you donate them? Can you find an alternative use for those? And things like textiles, again, is something that for us in blue cart is a contaminant, but there are plenty of avenues within the city to take that material. It's just to get the information out there. And a bit of it is like Bill mentioned, it's going to be motivating people to do that, right? It's going to take a couple of extra steps to take your clothes or your shoes to a location where they're actually going to recycle it or even reuse it.
Okay. This is a positive comment from Betty, who said that in her high rise, we had a speaker who also brought flyers of examples of what could be recycled and what went into the garbage. They are now posted on each floor by the chutes. And I can just comment that there is a flyer in our little garbage chute on the floors as well. I'm not positive people are reading them, but it's a step forward. It is. And then I would also like to let you know that Jordan is reminding everybody, for all of you that are on Facebook, that Chicago, as Bill said, Chicago Environmentalists on Facebook is an excellent resource. So for all of you people on Facebook, please check out Chicago Environmentalists and join that group. And Tessa was going to say the same thing. Sharon says that her high rise also has a detailed list by the chutes, easy to do and important to have. And Julia has a question. Who is Chicago partnering with to recycle textiles? And she's sorry if you said that name already and she missed it.
Yeah, so it's actually being done through the Chicago Park District. They have an agreement with the Green City Project to house, actually they have partners, they have two different partners, Green City Project, and I want to say Reuse Again. Reuse Again has the USA in their name, their title. So there are, I want to say, upwards of like 30 different locations, park locations, where you could find a textile box to drop off that material. One bit of what Bill's work did do too for us is we have got contacts in several municipalities now. One of them was in New York City, and a really cool project that they had in New York City called, I believe it's called Refashion, which is to recycle textiles in high-rise buildings. It is something, I'm not saying we're ready for it for this year, but it is, it's kind of connecting a lot of the things that have been mentioned either on the chat in terms of the city's communicating of what should be done in a high-rise building, or recycling and doing a better job of messaging recycling. And then thirdly, the textiles part of it. There was a system set up in New York where they actually had a message out to a lot of the high-rise buildings to say, hey, there's going to be a collection vehicle in your neighborhood, and try to work with management companies within a building to say, hey, if you've got tenants or residents in the building that are interested in recycling some of their clothes, you can bring them all down on this Tuesday, and we're going to, have the collection vehicle here to take all the material away. So it just seems like one of those projects that is really, really cool. It's something we're going to be looking into. Hopefully we can get to doing that in 2022 as a city-sponsored event as well.
I'll just add really quickly to the textiles. That was there's a lot of innovation around textile recycling right now happening. So over the next couple of years, I think we'll have lots of opportunities. It is one of the major streams in waste right now, along with organics and food. So there's definitely going to be something happening around that. And I just saw the chat. There was a question about if you give it to Goodwill, does it go to the Park District project? Goodwill has its own infrastructure for recycling textiles that they don't resale.
Okay, well, that brings us to the close of our hour. I cannot thank both of you, Chris, Bill. This has been incredibly informative. Lots of good tips in there. Chris, we wish you the best of luck on all of those amazing accomplishments. I believe I can see some silent clapping going on in the background. And so we truly thank you so very much. And to everybody that joined this evening, I thank you on behalf of the Chicago League for joining Chicago in Focus. And we look forward to future programs. So on that note, I will just close this out, say thank you again. I wish everybody stay well and have a good evening and good night.